Welcome back to the West Point Lake Update. I'm your host, Park Ranger Rebecca Downey with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We have a wonderful show lined up for you today. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. With me now is Park Ranger Ben Williams with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Ben, thank you for being on the show. I brought you on because we are starting to get into our annual boundary line inspection. We usually send a news release out to the public a month or two in advance of us actually getting out in the woods and walking and being near public property. But you know, you're a forester, natural resource specialist is some of the other titles that you use on the project. So I wanted to have you explain to some of our viewers what a boundary line inspection is.
Okay, well thanks for having me. Here at West Point Project, we have about 320 miles of boundary line. It stretches from about 3 miles north of Franklin, close to the Highway 27 bridge, all the way south down to Langdale Dam in Valley, Alabama. So we've got a lot of property line that we need to maintain. And the reason why we have to maintain it is back when the Corps was authorized to construct West Point Project, and they started buying the land around, then they had to delineate the property lines. It's just like a neighbor, you know, in a subdivision, they've got a property line, so does the public property around the lake. So we have to do some inspections every now and then around the lake.
When we say maintain the boundary line, we have a lot of different markers that are out in the field that a lot of our visitors are going to encounter in our day use areas and our campgrounds, as well as being more in the woods and walking some trails. And when we say clearing a boundary line, what does that mean?
Well, we send our contractor around every year to do boundary line maintenance, and that's just so that we can maintain its delineation. So they usually go out in groups of 4 to 5, and they have paint and hand tools, chainsaws and lopping shears, things like that, to clear the boundary line out to be sure it doesn't get overgrown so you can still find it. And that's one thing that, especially the locals here in LaGrange, West Point area, they know what the red paint means, and that's the Corps' property line around the lake.
Yeah, and I've provided some picture images of what those boundary lines mean. It's a series of stripes that are horizontal on a tree and circles that determine, hey, the property line, which is actually an imaginary GPS coordinated line, but the trees represent that you're close to it.
That's correct, yes. It's not exactly the tree itself, and that is the property line. It's got paint on it, and it's just witnessing to where it is. We do have one series of markings with 2 stripes and a spot on the top of the 2 stripes that delineate that the property line goes through the center of that particular tree. Other than that, it's just 2 painted lines on one side of a tree facing to where the boundary line is.
That's a good guide for any of the private homeowners that may be near the project waters. That if they go into their backyard, they may see some of those trees.
That's correct, yes.
Within a couple of feet of their home, or walking down into our property, they may encounter those trees later. And that really shows you've crossed from the public property into, or private property into, more public lands.
That's correct, yes. And we also do have boundary monuments. Everywhere where our boundary line makes a turn or corners, we have a monument there. Some of them are concrete, some of them are galvanized pipe driven into the ground. They're also painted red, so if you ever come up on a monument on the ground, driven in the ground, painted red, we'll have trees around that as well pointing towards it, and that's usually where the boundary line makes a turn. So it stops going in a straight direction.
When we say monuments, we're not talking about a statue or anything that's a by my shoulder in height that we're talking about, very low to the ground.
Correct, yeah.
They may not be visible until you're right up on them, and it's very hard to see when the leaves and pine straw have covered them up.
That's correct. They're survey monuments, so some of them are in a concrete post that are about 6 to 8 inches off the ground with stamped numbers on top of it, and some of them are just pipes driven in the ground that have numbers stamped on the side. So normally if you see anything red close to West Point, you're probably fixing to cross into public land.
And that's really important if you're a hunter on the property and you're interested, and let's just say you have private land, you've got acres of land, to know where you should and shouldn't be putting maybe your feeders for the deer, where you should stop your food plots, where you should have a tree stand and where you shouldn't have a tree stand. We don't allow that kind of stuff to be on the public side, the Corps side, for land management reasons.
That's right, yeah. We do have limitations on what individuals can do on public land. We have permitting functions for those things. Most of the time people are using them as shoreline use permits for docks, but also we do let people hunt on the Corps property, but we have designated areas for that. So they really need to call and find out where it is, and most importantly, they need to get a permit before they do it.
Absolutely. You don't want to just walk onto the Corps side and say, okay, we've got, it looks to be an acre out here of just trees. I'm just going to hunt it. Can't do that. Have a process. We have areas that you can and can't hunt, and it's very specific to how close you are to a recreation area and any other cultural reasons why we're managing it.
Yeah, the Corps management's different than some of the national forest lands that are around here. We're authorized by Congress for different reasons, so our procedures are a little different.
Now, talking about, you mentioned that there are extra permits if you want to do something on our property, which means if you've got a home that maybe you want a dock or a path, that, again, you want to contact our project management office to see if you are approved in that. But if you feel like you need to underbrush, you feel like you need to cut a tree down that maybe is leaning towards your side of the property, we actually have some procedures for that.
Yes, we do. Any activity that takes place on the public land around West Point project needs to be coordinated through our office first, at the project management office at West Point. If anybody's interested in doing any type of underbrushing work in order to facilitate walking to the shoreline a little bit easier, that does require a shoreline use permit, and they are restricted in certain areas of the lake where they can and can't do it. If there are any trees that could potentially be hazardous to a private property, they need to call our office and ask us to have a ranger come out and evaluate that tree, and then we can move forward from there, whether we allow the homeowner to cut it or if the Corps of Engineers might come out and cut it.
Wonderful. So again, if you're a visitor on the lake or if you're a homeowner, and you happen to encounter this time of the year where we are doing our boundary line maintenance and inspections, the contractor may be in a different area of the lake, possibly with tractors, with machinery that are clearing that line a little bit easier, again, painting, but the park rangers may be inspecting the line in a different section of the lake, and we are walking those property lines. So for our safety, what would you encourage the public to do as we're coming through your area?
Just be aware. We send out news releases when we're going to be doing boundary line inspections. Sometimes the park rangers walk in pairs. Sometimes we go as an individual out there, just depending on the area we are in. Most of us do wear orange vests when we're out there walking. We will stay on the government side of the line, the public property side of the line, unless for whatever reason there's a big ditch or something we need to transfer up onto private property. But we try to stay off of it if at all possible. And usually we are opposite of the lake from the contractor, where the contractor is actually doing the painting and the clearing of the property line. We'll probably be on the opposite side of the lake doing the inspections, making sure the paint is still visible, seeing if there are any monuments that have been damaged or missing, and making sure things have been cut back or if they need to be cut back again sooner.
And park rangers, for example, I'm one, you're one, we all go out and we walk the woods and we walk this property line, and we do wear our safety gear. We make sure that we are visible from a distance to anyone that may be in the area, but there are some things that we can't avoid, which is if dogs are a very prominent thing that we see out in the woods, whether it is a stray dog, or maybe it's your dog that just happens to not be penned, not be on a leash, and has free roam. We would prefer them to hopefully be on leashes. So part of that news release is to let people know we're coming through your area. please make sure that your animals are secure for our safety as well, because they cross the line. They don't care where those trees are.
That's right.
They come out, and usually they're very nice, but occasionally we get a couple animals that are very just protective of their homes.
That's correct, yeah. And you know, it's kind of funny you mentioned that. I actually experienced that a couple weeks ago. I was walking my section of the boundary line. I was by myself, and I did have a neighborhood dog come towards the property line, but I've been doing this a while, and I knew how to be able to see
scary.
I knew how to be able to see the line, and then give him plenty of room that he knows I'm not a threat. So I was able to give him a wide berth and get around him. But it would be nice if people would understand that we are back there, and even though the dog may be friendly to them, they're not necessarily friendly to us.
Yeah, we'll wave. We're not out there to get you in trouble. Right. We are going to take notes. You know, we look for things called encroachments, which, you know, we make sure that things that need to be on your side or on your side, and it's not overlapping, and make sure that there aren't any unapproved trails, there aren't any four-wheeling trails or anything like that, debris piles that are on the wrong side of that tree line.
That's correct. Yeah, we're just out there.
We're not out there to get you in trouble and knock on your door that same day, but we'll take some notes and pass it up, and we may talk to you later on.
We're just out there to maintain the integrity of the public land. That's all it is.
So, Ben, thank you so much for being on the show today. Stay right here, though. We want to talk about another topic with you.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Susan Cromer, Park Ranger with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at West Point Lake, reminding you that life jackets save lives. Life jacket loaner stations are located at our campground and beach area gatehouses around the lake. These life jackets are available for you and your family to use at no cost. Please take advantage of this free program and keep a close eye on your children while enjoying yourself at West Point Lake. For more information, please call 706-645-2937.
Nobody wants to be stopped by a law enforcement officer.
Everyone wants to feel safe.
So we've trained our officers to first listen and then explain.
We ask if you have contact with one of our officers, you listen, give him an opportunity to explain, comply with his requests, and if there's a problem, contact us so that we can investigate your complaint.
Listen, explain, comply, then complain.
Our safety and yours matters.
Welcome back. Ben's still with me. Our next topic that we have for you on the show is one that is it's cool to smell the fire smoke on the lake. We all love the smell of fire in the backyards, but here in the next month, we're going to start to see more smoke on the project. We're talking about our prescribed burning program. And Ben, your forestry background plays a big role in how you guys plan and manage. So can you explain to us what partners that you work with to help do our prescribed burning on the lake?
Well, we work with the local forestry commission offices in Alabama and Georgia to help us out by installing the fire breaks, and also in some cases if we need some more hands at the fire, we'll ask them to come help us out. And
what is a prescribed burn?
A prescribed burn, it's a fire that we light in the woods, but we do it under controlled circumstances. We write a prescription for it. That's why it's called prescribed. So we take in several different factors that we look at to be sure that when we go out and execute the fire that it'll have the results that we want it to have.
Okay. And so we see a lot of this happening with the public. If there's not a burn restriction in the state for any reason, usually homeowners do prescribed burns. They can get with the Forestry Commission to help them. But what we're talking about is a ground fire, a ground fire that can spread over a couple acres at a time, that we control where the flame is going, and that we make sure that there are safe fire breaks. What's a fire break in this
fire
case?
break is, in the case of prescribed fire, it's just the absence of fuel. So it could either be a creek or a plowed line with a tractor. It's exposed bare mineral soil that doesn't have any combustible material in it.
Okay, so we utilize our water on the lake as a barrier. Flames obviously can't cross water, so that'll stop it there on the shoreline. We also have areas that we can rake, so again, removing those fuel sources. And what kind of fuels are common in the area of Georgia?
Where we are now, you're looking at mainly pine straw, hardwood leaf litter, things like that. You know, vines and shrubs as they die out in the wintertime what's left over is what we're consuming with the fire in the spring.
Now, Georgia, we have a very different type of fuel source because our vegetation is different than the areas of, let's talk about California and the wildfires that they have over there. It's very, very different. I don't think we're going to have the threat of it going crazy on the lake.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, like I said, we adhere to a strict regimen of what we want to do and how we want to prescribe the fires. Our fuel models here in the Southeast are completely different than what they are in California. Our humidity is way higher here, so our fuel moisture is higher. So I know most of the viewers will probably remember 2007 when the Okefenokee Swamp in South Georgia. That was a huge fire event, similar to what goes on in California, it seems like yearly. But that's once in a lifetime type of event that we have in the South. Most of the time, our humidity is at a level where we don't have the same type of drying that they have in California. So, but with that being said, our fuel models, even in the state of Georgia and Alabama, are completely different from the northern part of the state to the southern. So here in the Piedmont region where we are, it's mainly pine needles and hardwood leaves that we're burning.
So the process that you guys use here may not work on different parts of Georgia because, again, those regions are different.
That's
you want to go by example, gardening regions, zone 8, and there's different topographies here in Georgia.
Different topographies, different fuel types. Here, like I said, we're not to get too technical, but we are fuel model 9 most of the time here. That's a national Forest Service type fuel modeling system. Once you get farther south, you get into more waxy type vegetation. So the fire intensity farther south is a little bit higher than it is here.
So before I get into a lot of the details on what we do and how we do a prescribed burn, the tools and safety precautions that we use, a lot of our visitors that are out in our parks during the spring and summertime always reference, why does it look so burnt? Why does it look so charred in this park? And we usually do a prescribed burn in different sections of the lake. Maybe we rotate it every couple years.
Yeah, we do. We have different rotations for different areas for our management objectives. Our target is to burn between 1,700 and 2,000 acres a year. This year we have a target set of about 2,100 acres. A lot of those areas are in our hunting areas, some of the larger areas, but we do have some burn areas in parks. Some are kind of close to subdivisions. So we try to let people know. We send out a news release of the areas we're going to do that year, and we try to and we do our best for smoke management. Unfortunately, sometimes the weather does change in the middle of a burn, which can cause the smoke to go in a different direction. We do our best to mitigate that as quick as possible, but sometimes it happens.
And so you'll notice on some of the trees that we have that, although we mentioned ground fires, it's all going to depend on the oxygen content and how much fuel there is in that area. It could spike in certain parts. You could see a scorch go up a tree maybe 3 feet. But people are always asking me, our visitors and viewers, will it catch the trees on fire? Will it actually go up the trees?
It can, we try to prescribe not to do that.
If it does, it's a very specific kind. I know that a lot of our pine trees, for example, they are
fire tolerant.
Fire tolerant, which is very unique. They have a sap and they don't burn. They're actually designed to thrive in areas where fires are common.
They are. A lot of them are
a natural system to have fires.
Fire-adapted species. Pine trees are that. Longleaf pine especially can tolerate fire even at a young age. Loblolly pine, which is a predominant pine species here, can't survive fire at a young age. But they've got thick bark, and that helps insulate them from the heat. We do most of our burning in the late winter, early spring, when the humidity is just right and the temperature is cool enough that we can burn. However, with that said, we have different objectives for our burns. Some are wildfire reduction burns, where we just want to reduce the fuel load in case a campfire gets away from somebody, that it doesn't become catastrophic.
Get rid of all that pine straw and all that leaf litter.
We try to get rid of that. Now, in our hunting areas and some of our remote areas, we manage more for wildlife there than we would in a campground. So we try to burn those as the leaves are starting to break bud in the spring. So we want to reduce the amount of hardwood competition we have for our pine trees, and also that helps to allow more sunlight to reach the ground, to have more legumes and herbs and grasses growing for wildlife to eat.
Okay. So, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's another thing that I did want to focus on. we get a lot of undergrowth under our trees, and that's not natural. It's not normal in this region to see a lot of that. It's a lot of invasive species is what you're looking at. The fires can remove the intolerant fire species while allowing our natives to thrive.
Right, it helps. Unfortunately, sometimes when they're non-native invasive species, all you're doing is preparing the seed bed, and you can facilitate the spread a little bit, and we try our best not to do that, and we put our fire breaks in areas where we hopefully we won't have a seed transportation through there. And it, like you said, it does help to bring the undergrowth down. Our predominant forest species or forest stand type here, back before land fragmentation like we have now, was a pine forest, so that's what we're managing for. And that's why we use prescribed burning. Back before we had such a urban sprawl that we have now, a lightning strike would set a fire and it would meander through the woods and it would be controlled. But now with we've gotten very good at putting fire out. So the fire system out there in the natural world just hasn't been able to function like it used to. So this aids in that.
Yeah, and we're going to get rid of all the ticks and the less likelihood of that being, you know, keep the humidity, because if you've got a lot of vegetation under the trees like that, it just holds that humidity and it's just a breeding ground for a lot of things. So if we can eliminate that in our day use areas and campgrounds, we'll try to prep those areas ahead of time. But how we do a prescribed burn, I've got some video clips that I want to show our viewers, is that there's safety procedures. We have a meeting, we use specific types of equipment, and go ahead and just elaborate a little bit more on that.
Well, we do have like I said, we have a prescribed burn plan. We have a written plan for every burn we do. We do that ahead of time. We plan out the weather conditions we want, and then we decide what kind of equipment we need. Most of the time, the size of the burns that we have here we can facilitate with hand tools. We do have specific rakes that are made to cut roots and to cut small vegetation down so we can expose that bare mineral soil. It's more efficient to use a bulldozer. That's where the forestry commissions come in. We'll call them. They'll bring their tractors out and they'll put us in a fire break with their bulldozer, and makes it a lot quicker and easier that way. Also, in some instances, we want them to remain on site and to help us. They'll leave their bulldozer there, and just in case we have one of those unforeseen circumstances where the weather changes and we need to put the fire out.
And you notice that sometimes our signs get charred. We try to pull a lot of that debris and fuel sources away from the bathhouses, away from identifying signs that are out in the park, so the park rangers are out there first, prep the area. Hopefully the weather conditions haven't changed 20 minutes into the process, and then we will go ahead and start lighting. What do we use to light the fire?
We have a drip torch here. It's a mixture of diesel and gasoline in a 2-gallon tank that has a torch on the end of it. We light it, and the fuel mixture drips across the fire, and then falls onto the fuel. Kind
of a slow drip, and you put that right on the edge of a burn line, and you would expect that depending on the winds and how you guys have planned it, that fuel source will either spread into the thick area that you're wanting it to.
Right, correct.
And how do you keep it from the fire from coming the other direction where you don't want it?
Well, most of the time the fire break is the most efficient tool for that. They're usually about 4 to 6 feet wide.
Again, that's an area where we've eliminated the fuel. It's dirt or water.
It's bare mineral soil, nothing in there is flammable, so we'll light on the edge of that, and then what we're doing is we're lighting what's called a backing fire. And the fire is actually burning into the wind. So it's burning slow. The flame lengths are maybe 6 inches high, so it's not an intense fire. If you have a wind gust that comes, you may have a chance of having some embers blown across the break. But that's why when we initiate a fire and we're on that break, we stay there until it's sufficient distance away that we won't have that happen.
Okay, and you'll notice that we use a tool called a flapper. It's a piece of, is it leather?
It's not leather, it's rubber.
Rubber that we can drag across the ground. It basically eliminates the oxygen, which is one source that the fire does need. So it can suffocate a line if the flames are small enough.
If the flames are small enough. That tool works very well in grassy areas that we have around the lake. If we want to light a fire into a wood line, but then the fire starts creeping into the grass, we can put it out with that.
And for safety, if you happen to be caught in the woods, for whatever reason, while we're doing a prescribed burn, and we talk about a safe area for people to go. If you can't escape the flames that are too big, what is a black zone?
A black zone is area where the fire's already traveled. So there's no fuel in there to catch fire again. So that's the black area. That is the safest place at a prescribed fire. For those of us that are working the fire, we're wearing personal protective equipment. We have fire-resistant clothes on, heavy leather boots, hard hats, things like that. That if we need to get through an area to get to a black line for our own safety, we can do that. Most of our areas are burned up next to the water, so obviously the exposed shoreline is another place where a prescribed burn worker could go to.
Very good.
Like I said, we sent out a press release prior to burn season, so hopefully everybody's aware that there's going to be a burn in their neighborhood if it's close to that, and then once they see us start showing up in the yellow shirts and green pants, then they know what's about to happen.
Ben, thank you so much for being on the show. And again, I want to remind everybody that yes, we do send out press releases, but throughout the season, as we're doing day-to-day burns, we'll also update our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/westpointlake.usace and tell you that morning where we're going to be burning on how many acres and if you're going to see smoke in your area or not, so that you're better prepared in advance. If you are doing any recreational activities out on West Point Project and you are curious as to whether we're going to be burning in your area this year, please contact our project management office at 706-645-2937. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Annoying necessity.
Uncomfortable. Hot. I'm super confident, like comfortable in the water.
A good time can go bad real fast.
You see the lake and it's like a big cushioned pillow you're landing in until you get slammed down and you realize it's a brick wall when you're going that fast.
What if you got hit by something and you fall in the water, you're unconscious? It doesn't matter how good of a swimmer you are.
Everyone should wear one.
Have you made your campground reservations yet? Go to www.recreation.gov to make reservations at any of the Corps of Engineers campgrounds at West Point Lake, Amity Campground, R. Schaefer Herd, Whitetail Ridge, or Holiday Campground, up to 6 months in advance. A lot of the sites are pre-registered for the holidays already. New for 2018, starting this recreation season, our gatehouses will no longer be accepting cash payment or check. It will be credit card only for the efficiency of our parks. Also for 2018, if you haven't already made your shelter reservations around the park, there are 8 reservable shelters that can be reserved near the water, near the beach area for your family reunions, birthday parties, and other group gatherings. Please contact our project management office again at 706-645-2937. I would like to thank our guest for being on the show today. Park Ranger Ben Williams with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers talked to us today about our prescribed burn program and our boundary line inspections. Please give the project office a call anytime with your questions or shoot us an email at westpointlake@usace.army.mil.
Look ahead.